What's up, y'all?
Hi, we're live. Hello,
Hey,
Nubians.
what's
Hello,
going on, y'all?
wherever you are in the world. I stopped saying good morning because some places it's evening, and I love that. I love
All
it.
over the place.
Love
Amazing.
it.
Good morning. Hello. How you doing, my friend? How you
I
doing?
am. I
Love
said
it.
to you before we came on. I said I'm tired and inspired at the exact same time. It's
You,
like
our people would do that.
tired, tired of the nonsense, and at the same time I'm inspired because every day I get up and I'm like, there's enough worth saving here. We got work to
Oh,
do.
no question.
Yes, we can do
And
it.
what's the alternative? Just to lay down, right?
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is to, go into a space of escape. Fill our lives with food, fun, and folly. We can
Yeah.
just
Until reality crashes in and reminds us that it ain't make believe. Shout out to my frat brother and dear friend whose daughter will be graduating in the spring from Howard University, my man Will Packer, for keeping body and soul together on the blackest day of the Academy Awards that I don't watch, but on the blackest day of that day, reality jumped down and said, "Wait a minute, y'all know this make believe, right?" But Will kept it together. I'm like, "Yo, is that we are how many times have we talked about this, Prof? You done talked about had to talk about it every day, and we did hours in Nubia, but
somebody on YouTube, because we post some of these on YouTube. I can't believe you didn't talk about it. I can't believe you ain't talk about this. I can't believe you didn't talk about it. I'm like, yeah, I talked about it, just
yeah,
not here.
right,
Just not doing it here
right.
in this open troll fest forum of ignorance and blight. Yeah, I didn't post anything here for the animal trolls to grab onto it. Everybody's got an opinion about something. What's your opinion about the future of the world, and what are your contributions to that? And I know I'm overstating it, because for many of us it's a release,
Well,
to
that's the only
have.
reason I brought it up is because what you said. I
Yeah.
mean, the alternative is to escape into fantasy, but you can't. You may think you can, but you know,
And let me just say, balance is important. So if you want to, go into a Bridgerton weekend, and binge watch all of the,
sure,
the ridiculous and fun and, interesting things that are out there, watching Kanto for the 20th time, live your life. Live your life.
live your life,
We
live
don't
your
talk
life.
about Bruno. No, no.
Yeah,
But
live
how are
your life.
you?
Oh, I'm fine. I mean, I think it's interesting though. I mean, whatever and I mentioned the slap because that's how people are referring to it. I think what the real challenge, well, not the real underneath all this talk is community, in the sense that we live in a society that is so thoroughly curated and sliced and diced and disaggregated so that the energy that human beings create can be managed and used for the purpose of a tiny fragment of humanity, that when one of those things bursts through that captures all of our attention for a moment, everybody who has a thought about the human condition, what we need to be doing as human beings, what we should be thinking about and not thinking about, tries to ride that moment where has everybody's attention to say that. Some people say, "Well, I didn't agree with Kareem," or "Why does no, 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 no." Kareem is using the slap to say something else. July is using the slap to say something else. Roland is using the slap to say something. In other words, it ain't even about that. It's about, hey, wait, look over here, and everybody's looking right there. So is this the minute I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
deliver something?
Let me tell you something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Doc I had Dr. Robin Smith on. She's on every month. She has a show on Sirius XM on Sundays, and she said, this moment was about everybody. It was about our individual, and I was like, boom. I mean, that's it. We all found ourselves, and if we're, I had this talk with my class yesterday. I said, the goal is to find yourself in other people, and if you could find yourself in another human being, it's going to be really hard for you to diminish them
Ooh,
as a person. And I think, this journey in life is like, let's have community and find ourselves, and because we all are in one another. If we, because we're connected, we breathe the same breath. But I think, that is that's too much tick non huh. It's too
no, it's not. No, it's not. That's where we have to be. Can we find ourselves in other people? And that, if we can, then the world, I'm sorry, human, well, I guess the world too, in the short term. I say the world, well, every time I say the world, I'm thinking the earth, and about the fact that the earth is poised to expunge
Yeah,
the
you
species.
see what my mother nature right now. It was
Yeah,
20, then it was 70, then
yeah.
the freaking it's like the whiz of the. I think I saw flying monkeys yesterday. I was like, what the hell? It's blowing. It's cold. It's hot.
Hey,
It's
the
going.
earth is like, I got a cold. It's called Homo sapiens, and I'm gonna sneeze, and then my antibodies are gonna fight. I had to protect myself.
Got
So,
to.
so from what? From these people, and I mean, and we're to blame, the species. And I don't mean we're to blame in our current iterations. We all came out of Africa. We made some decisions that, in retrospect, look like they may have been iffy. Like, I mean, some places in the world, maybe we shouldn't have went to go and stay. Just go up there and look around and come back where it's warm. I mean, we don't know, but I'm just saying, because the cultures that come out of the cultures of selfishness, the cultures of individuality, these things, shake out to Job. I mean, so many others write about this, have talked about this, have talked about this. You adapt to your environment. And so when you say we have to find ourselves in each other, that is a profound lesson. That's Egyptians would call that a sebait. That is a teaching. Because it's when we think we're different from each other, so deeply different from each other, that we can't be one another, be for one. Like I said, we all breathe, we all eat, we all sleep, we all suffer, we all have joy. If we can't see that common humanity, the result is perhaps there won't be a humanity, because that other behavior is going to result in the elimination of species. I mean, I love how self-centered humanity has become. So even the popular culture, dystopias and the end of the earth, and y'all really act like somehow you're going to destroy the environment and the environment won't snap back. It may take 100,000 years or 200,000 or 1,000,000 years, but you really think y'all? I mean, yeah, you could blow it up. Yeah, you could, but ain't no celestials in the heart of the earth that's gonna bust the earth apart. Thanos isn't coming with a snap. Y'all really? Science fiction really is how human beings, well, at least how cultures view themselves.
Yeah.
You think you got that kind of power?
I mean, 2 months in a lockdown, the ocean and the skies and everything cleared up.
Crazy.
Animals is like, word, we can. Oh, okay, let's go out and be animals. Yeah.
No question. And I was like, are they gone? Oh God, thank God. Come on, y'all. Right. Wasn't it something? I mean, all the tragedy, all the death, all the transitions, terrible. And at the same time, the earth healing itself. How many of us reflecting on March, April, May, June 2020, when we ventured out and smelled that air, saw that deer, that rabbit, or saw the bloom of those shrubs and trees in July and August, looked up, didn't see the trails of jet plane, looked around, the skies blue, and thought, this is only after like 4 or 5 months. It was remarkable. So maybe we can get to that.
We can't. I have no faith in that.
You have
But
no faith.
no, but we're gonna keep doing this work because I have faith in us to at least try to free as many people before the earth sneezes.
How
And,
about that?
and maybe a few of us will survive to rebuild whatever is
Oh,
next.
no question. No question.
You've been busy this week. I
We've
thought
all
I
been
had a
busy.
schedule. I said,
No,
you in that too? What you? What?
we've been busy. Nah, we've all been busy. We've both been busy. I mean, when I get a glimpse now because of these last 2 years of what it means to be in constant dialogue differently, because now because of COVID we're all sitting here, but when you do it every day in the week, and now it's like 7 days a week, and then
Oh,
you added narrative in Nubia, and now it's like constant conversation.
and let me apologize really quickly. Brenda Green has an amazing conference, and I'm moderating afterwards. And I have not been in communication, so if y'all see her, tell her I'll be there today.
We are going to be
Moderating the panel. I
no
will be there.
we're going to be short. We're going to keep this one short today because of what happened this week. If that's all right with you, we'll
Oh,
do it real short, and
perfect.
then we'll just kind of pick up next week. And please, when you see my friend Dr. Brenda Green, please tell her I said hello and then duck, because I'm supposed to be in Brooklyn this weekend. April,
Duck
Dr. Green text me, said I just could not make it. So I really want, because the writers conference, it's a writers conference. The writers conference, if y'all have never been to the writers conference at Mega Evers, it is one of the jewels of the black world, not the United States, not the hemisphere, the black world. And just looking at the lineup, and I was supposed to be dead up in there this weekend, and
Yeah,
I would have.
everybody's there. Loree, on my panel, I have Ibram Kendi and Kevin
Yeah, see,
Powell and Lodi. I mean, yeah, it's gonna
I would
be.
have loved to have been there to give that work to my friend and colleague Ibram Kendi,
All right.
because
I'm gonna drop
you
the
know.
link. I don't know. I think it's too late to register, but I'll drop
Oh
the
no,
link.
no, 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 no. I would have been up in there, but if y'all can watch, yeah, drop the link, please. Doc, drop the link so people can see, because it's an important conversation. Kevin Powell, all those conversations. I hope the slap doesn't drag it in another direction, because over the years, Sonia Sanchez, Ishmael Reed, John Oliver Killens, well, it goes back to John Killens, of course. I mean, Medgar Evers, which is of course one of our great black colleges. You only get the designation historically black college university if you were founded during Jim Crow coming forward. But everybody else is called a predominantly black institution. So as we've talked about before,
We
Charles,
call Medgar Evers an HBCU.
and well, it is the
Fight
HBCU.
us if you want to, but I'm
Right.
calling it HBCU.
That's right. It's a federal designation. So I mean, I don't even, right. I mean, Chicago State in Chicago, Charles Drew out in LA, Medgar Evers in Brooklyn. They are black colleges. And in the case of Medgar Evers, yes, from its inception. So if HBCU means something, again, that's just a federal designation. It applies to Medgar Wiley Evers. When you walk in there, in fact, I was just looking at something, because Medgar Evers has done a good job of digitizing a pretty nice cluster of previous events from there. And of course, we know the great Dr. Betty Shabazz for many years was an administrator at Medgar Evers, and watching her in the same auditorium y'all gonna be in.
No, this is virtual.
Oh, they're not gonna be there.
No, it's virtual.
See,
Virtual.
that's
Yeah.
why Dr. Green really gonna get me there, because I was thinking I'm getting on
You
the
coulda
train and
coulda
coming to me, because I know they trying to get back to Brooklyn. When I think Medgar Evers, I think of walking those streets. I think about going around where Ebbets Field used to be and stopping at the Jackie Robinson mural. I don't come to Brooklyn, that part of Brooklyn, and not go by the shrines. I mean, Robinson. In fact, we talk about Jackie Robinson in a couple of weeks, because April 15th, of course, is Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball, white Major League Baseball. But Medgar Evers sits at the heart of the black world in many ways, because Brooklyn is the whole Caribbean and Africa, which is why what I saw this week in California broke my heart. But
Okay.
I mean,
Let's see.
anyway,
Go to tell us because how did you get dragged? Well, I mean, invited into.
dragged, invited, and dragged. I was miscast, which is unfortunate, because I would have loved to. Well, anyway, let's just and let me pause here and say that, because we're going to keep it short today, this is a point of entry conversation, and it might take us next Saturday, maybe the Saturday after, depending on how we vibe and how we feel. And for those who are not and not yet in narrative and Nubia, understand that on Monday night, day after tomorrow, when we finish on the 4th of April, our last part of Martin Luther King's Where Do We Go From Here, which has been a remarkable conversation. We're reading chapter 6, The World House, where he goes international, Dr. King, in this testament to humanity, the global humanity. In fact, he opens and he says, however deeply American Negroes are caught in the struggle to be at last home in our homeland of the United States, we cannot ignore the larger world house in which we are also dwellers. Equality with whites will not solve the problem of either whites or Negroes if it means equality in a world society stricken by poverty and in a universe doomed to extinction by war. When we finish on Monday with Dr. King's global vision, and of course, he was killed exactly 1 year to the day to his April the 4th, 1967 speech at Riverside Baptist Church. I'm looking for, oh yeah, look, Baba Vincent Harding, who helped him write that speech. This is his book, Martin Luther King, The Inconvenient Hero. And he talks about that speech, The Land Beyond, in chapter 5, The Land Beyond, Reflections on King's Beyond Vietnam speech. Exactly 1 year before Dr. King was killed, was assassinated, he gave a talk at Riverside Baptist Church where he comes out against the Vietnam War. And it's very important. I mean, here's a picture that Dr. Harding put in with, here he is with Benjamin Spock, Dr. King at the rally. His little child, children are not born to burn. Of course, because this is a white child talking about Vietnamese children who are getting hit with that napalm. Some of you are veterans who were forced. Talk about being dragged into a conflict. And um, Vincent Harding begins that chapter with, somehow Martin King refuses to die within us, among us. Many years after it was delivered in 1967, his historic Riverside Church speech, Beyond Vietnam, reappears and thrusts upon us a king we had largely chosen to forget. I love Vincent Harding. I loved him when he was physically alive, and I could sit with him and listen to him, his wife, Rosemary, and be with them. I love him now to this day because he was a forceful, powerful. He is a forceful, powerful spirit. He and his wife. Um, um, Remnants is her testimony, actually published by their daughter Rachel. She got it out, which is her testimony, her mother's testimony, her mother and father, very powerful people, and Rachel Harding, a powerful force in her own right. But the reason it comes to me, my mind, his gentleness, the gentleness in his spirit comes to mind. This son of the Caribbean who's raised in New York, born and raised in New York. The reason it comes to mind now is because he says we've chosen to forget. And some of us have, but most of us haven't, because we were never taught that king. That's why he named that book, Martin Luther King, The Inconvenient Hero. But when we finish on Monday night in Nubia, where do we go from here? Our conversations have gotten deeper and deeper every week over the month we've been reading this book, and we timed it so that we would end on the day of his assassination. And so that conversation, that Monday night conversation, which began as kind of like, let's all collect in here and talk about what anybody wants to talk about. Last Monday, of course, we kind of started with the slap, and it wasn't a global conversation as it always is. And the first couple of people who came in, and we're usually just north of 1,000. We usually peak sometime around 1,300 or more. Uh, and that's just, and again, the momentum is incredible just in the course of the last year. And then week after week, you see it growing and getting more complicated and deep and engaging. And I mean, and it's a lot of education going on. We're all learning from each other. And in the course of our Monday conversation, which actually began with some comments from some Africans in the UK, Adesoji and Ndoku came on, among other things, and mentioned the fact that while the world is talking about this slap between two men of African descent in the US, the Sudan got bombed again. The French fighting, the US uh, dropping munitions in Syria, and East Africa still. There was a long article in The Guardian yesterday about Ethiopia and a truce that has been called, at least for humanitarian purposes, even as the white terrorists out of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has refused humanitarian aid from the Red Cross and others trying to get in to certain places in the Ukraine. And the point that Adesoji and Ndoku were raising was that, we are blinded in society to these real crises, often by the spectacle. And afterward, and over the course of the conversation, it came out that the challenges here in the United States that are unique to African people in the US and not unique at the same time to Africans all over the world in one way or the other, it requires us to balance our local experiences with our connecting across these imaginary lines and these places on the globe. And I'm being very delicate about that because there is a real challenge that we continue to face to see our common humanity beyond these socially constructed identities of race and gender. And by gender, I don't mean biology. I mean how we construct these definitions of female and male that we have inherited over generations. And they got weaponized centuries ago in the process of dehumanization. And class, social class, economic class. How do we see each other's common humanity? And then when we think about ourselves as African people, it is very challenging at times to see our common humanity in a society, a global modern society, as our friend and brother Howard French has reminded us of in the latest iteration of a long scholarly conversation about this, has been dead set against the idea of African humanity for around a little bit more than 5 centuries. And it becomes very difficult because we bump up against those barriers, those imaginary geographical barriers, those very real cultural barriers. And we don't often take the time to seek the common ground because what has intervened is the pain and the hurt of the local experience. So we don't even share our pain. So on Monday night in Nubia, as we were talking about, this spectacle of the slap and what we might or may not be able to learn from it, or better yet, let's just talk about it and have conversation. And thank you so much, Prof, for taking that into the governance apparatus that narrative in Nubia are. Who are we to each other? What also emerged was there's something, as James Baldwin once wrote, from birth to death, there's something very personal about being Black in America. And by America, of course, he meant the United States. Even as we saw an Afro-Latina win one of those little statues that looks like Ptah. When as we see it, with his hands there on the stand, I'm like, that's Ptah. Did y'all rip that off too? Oscar. And she called it Oscar Me Show. But better yet, we should have our own show. I mean, Will Packer is one of the great creative geniuses of the age in terms of how being able to fuse popular culture with kind of mass appeal and sneak a little lesson in. And I laughed about it. I saw Holly Greenman earlier this week, and I said, you remember when uh Will's daughter was here visiting, and her parents were there for Accepted Students Day, and Will found out that I knew you and left her with her mother. Y'all good? Okay, I'll be back. And made me drag him over here to see you, because he said when he was an undergrad at Florida A&M, watching Sankofa is what got him fired up about making movies in the first place. So I mean, just listening to the two of them in conversation, and then seeing this thing unfold last week, Sunday night, and then listening to, the contrast. What just a beautiful human being in so many ways. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that when we were just talking about what that may or may not mean, that moment may or may not mean, it emerged that, you know, it's something very personal about being an African in the United States, as distinct from an African from other places. And the sister won the statue for West Side Story, and you talk about us about Puerto Ricans and Latinx. Africans are there too, and that's a colony still. The Latin one of the colonies of the United States. Baba Oz brought up how the empire, the whole book which talks about how the United States. We think the United States is that little outline that people see on the map. Now they got stuff all over the place. These colonists, and so when we logged off, I couldn't go to sleep. I normally don't, because I got class first thing Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. But I also had on my schedule an obligation to appear before the California Reparations Task Force Committee. There was a study bill, Assembly Bill 3121, which was passed over a year ago now, to 2020, I think. I have to go back and look at my notes and look at the website. In fact,
It was 2020. Gavin Newsom
yeah,
convened.
say something about it, because you probably got to pull. Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
I talked about it. So 2020, definitely Gavin Newsom wrote it, put the task force together, and California is the first state to do this. I know Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, is the first city to actually confront and deal with reparations, even though that's not going the way I think people thought it would. And I think this won't go the way people think it will.
It
So,
absolutely won't.
right. So,
Absolutely won't. Thank you. No, that's important because and again, this one's going to be short, y'all, because it'll give us a chance to really sit with what we're about to do, which is use reparations and use the context of the California discussion and debate to think about relationships between African people. And so, yeah, I mean, the leader of the Democrats in the assembly, now the California Secretary of State, because the Secretary of State in California was called to come to Washington as a senator to replace the current um, Vice President of the United States, who was the junior senator from California, Kamala Harris. So the guy who was Secretary of State was appointed to take her seat. And Shirley Weber moved from the legislature to this Secretary of State. Dr. Weber, retired professor of Africana Studies at San Diego State University, one time president of the National Council of Black Studies, formidable intellectual, African sister. By that, I mean African born in the United States, but I'm thinking globally. Scholar, warrior, politician, has a guiding hand in that legislation as well. And a commission was formed. It was enacted last September 30th, as you say, 2020. Established a task force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans. Task Force Reparations Task Force. It charges the California Department of Justice with providing administrative, technical, and legal assistance to the task force, and so forth and so on. Well, this is a study bill. In other words, the commission was formed to study the possibility of reparations in the state of California. This is, and you all notice I wore my in Cobra shirt, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Very important to understand that C stands for coalition. Now, council coalition, meaning if you for reparations, you should be in the conversation. And Cobra is the oldest continuous reparation group. And there are other formations, NARC, National African American Research, Reparations Council, where you bring all the different groups together. My friend, brother Ron Daniels. In Cobra, I've been engaged with, involved with, member of in Cobra for many, many years since, I was, I guess in my early 20s and mid 20s. And so many of the folk who are who were involved within Cobra or part of the reparations movement more broadly, who now, how you see the elephants and you see those white birds picking at the elephant to eat their food. I think of academics that way. They go in the archives up. They're not picking from a living creature. They pick from the archive and think they can. Well, for me, people are writing now. They've discovered, meaning, hey, here's a way for me to tell you that I'm worth something. When they start publishing with the white university presses and these interpretations, I call them autopsies almost. Some of them very brilliant, but still autopsies in a sense, because you're writing about a thing as if it is dead. Even though you may put a little afterword in to say this is a living tradition and move, but they're writing about Mario Bedelli or Queen Mother Moore. These people I knew. I'm sure they'll try to write about Conrad Worrell and all these folk. Well, these organizations, these movements continue. And I wore my in Cobra today for this short moment we're going to do today, because this was the last time in Cobra was in person. So it was 2019. We were in Detroit. And that was the last time that Congressman Conyers, who of course is from Detroit, represented Detroit for many, many years, had, occupied the seat for decades that now Rashida Tlaib, honorably, in my estimation, and a lot of other people's occupies. In fact, Rashida Tlaib participated in the Cobra conference as well, because solidarity is very important. I love the way you framed this morning or today, Prof. We have to see our common humanity. And, Congressman Conyers came with his son and he charged us to continue to fight. And of course, he made transition not too long after that. And Sheila Jackson Lee became the lead person in terms of signatories and gathering support for H.R. 40, which is the bill to create the reparations study task force at the federal level. Well, California, as California does, has led in that work. And this isn't the first reparations legislation In fact, I would encourage folk as we're thinking about next week, where we're going to get deeper into this. It's an excellent compendium of documents, essays, historical pieces on the question of reparations. It's called Redress for Historical Injustices in the United States. Michael Martin and Marilyn Yaquinto edited this. They edited it, but when I tell you, this is 2007, that just to give you a glimpse at the table of contents, when I tell you that there are a number of things in here, and around page 470, you begin to get the documents. And there are 6 sections of documents related to reparations, federal acts and resolutions, beginning with the Confiscation Acts of the 1862. In fact, where's my friend's book? Oh, yeah, here. Catherine Franke, who was a professor at Columbia Law School, as I've told you about her book before, Repair, Redeeming the Promise of Abolition. She talks about those confiscation acts, and she focuses on South Carolina and on Mississippi as places where reparations of a form were proposed, were actually enacted for a brief shining moment, and then betrayed. But these documents are in this volume. In fact, I teach that class. I teach that book. I use that book. I've used it. There's a second edition coming out at Howard Law School. I taught it again this semester in my class, my race, law, and change class. Field Order 15 at 40 Acres and a Mule piece is in here. Freedmen's Bureau Act, Southern Homestead Act, House Resolutions, section. I'll skip over section 2 for a second and just mention these others again. This is going to be a brief one this morning.
And we've had several reparations conversations in class with Carr.
Mm-hmm. We have, and I encourage people to go back and look, because we've talked about a lot of this, but now I think you're right. You're absolutely right. And really, I wish we would, but let me not use that conjunction. And just like that slap got everybody's attention, this California AB 3121 got everybody's attention because of what happened this week. And it has been misreported, as we would expect, by social structure media, mass entertainment media, news entertainment media. So yeah, in fact, thank you for interjecting, because that gets me back in the rhythm. I think we're going to finish. So section 3 is municipal resolutions: Detroit, Chicago, San Francisco, New York, DC, Philadelphia. All these are cities. This is before Evanston. Then section 4, advocacy and activism. Many of these are the international Black nationalists and internationalists. A lot of people don't know the Black Manifesto is in here. Well, part of it. This is actually the book, James Forman. I showed y'all this before, Black Manifesto, where James Forman busted up in the church in New York. It's like, give up the money, and the churches began putting money to give up. That's private reparations, private corporations, and there have been legal strategies to sue. My sister Ajua Adiatoro in Cobra, leading that work along with other lawyers, serious legal minds. And I won't get too far more into this. The Episcopal Church with case studies. There's, of course, the Durban meeting in 2001. We're going to talk about all this again. And we have talked about it before, but I want to do it.
Wait, so people have been studying and pushing for reparations, Dr. Carr, for how long? For how long?
Well, actually, this is what we're going to talk about. Oh, good. I'm glad. This is a tease, because, again, we're going to have this. I expect it's going to be more. A lot of people watch our conversations, and I think they're probably going to be, this is probably going to expand it even more. Since the first person put their hands on somebody in Africa, if we're going to get technical about it, the reparations struggle began with the act of violence that made the reparations struggle necessary. It's very important. And it has been so badly underinformed that the car crash that I witnessed with a front row seat this week, and I participated in on Tuesday. What was the phrase just before you hit the live button? What did you say? Inspired?
I said I'm tired and inspired at the same time.
There it is. Professor Hunter be dropping them bars, don't she? Not only teach, then you put it in a phrase, tired and inspired. That's how I felt after I got off Tuesday. So again, I got my 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna do this real quick. I won't go on to talk about it. The section 5 is case studies. Remember 1997 when Bill Clinton apologized for Tuskegee and caught all kind of hell. The Oklahoma Commission to study what happened in 1921. Remember, we talked about that when we talked about Tulsa, that big report that came out in 21. Well, they had one in the year 2000. Rosewood, Florida, 2004. Florida passed 2 statutes, 2004, apology statutes in 2004. The lawsuits, several of them are in here. The Department of Agriculture, the Black Farmers lawsuit is in here. In other words, all this stuff we're talking about now, and some of that stuff, much of that stuff's covered in the California, but I'm going to go back to section 2. There have been state level resolutions for apologies. There have been state level resolutions for study. New Jersey, African American Reconciliation Study Commission Act 2003. Texas, Joint Resolution 2003. Maryland, Joint Resolution 4 in the year 2004. And Michigan in the year 2000. The same year of 2000, California Senate passed the first of 2. Wait, this ain't the first? No, California Senate passed one. Senate Bill number 2199 in 2000, and then the Joint Resolution number 1 in 2001, where they resolved that they told the federal government, get that HR 40 passed. And now here we are 20 years later when AB 3121 is passed to create the commission in California, which brings us to Tuesday. I've been asked a few weeks before, and when we were all in Hershey, Sister Nkechi Taifa is one of the, driving forces behind this, Jam Awanor and others. Without a Carr, will you testify at the California reparations hearings? Well, because of course of COVID, we now can do all this stuff at once. So when we get off of here, when we pause this for now in a moment, Karen going to a conference later on. I'm going to another conference, and nobody leave their house. So in other words, we have been able to preserve our physical form in some ways. All of us, some people didn't have an option. They had to still work. Y'all stay safe as this next thing comes around. But in terms of work, we working more than ever, 7 days a week, with time to pause, maybe get a snack and take a nap and get up and keep working. Well, Monday night I was up because they wanted a written statement, and I had sent something for the record, but now I have to do it in 8 minutes. And the conversation on Tuesday was not the conversation I think I would have been more effective in having a conversation with, or at least I would have been more interested in having a conversation with, which is, what is the legal basis for reparations, and what are the possibilities within the current structure, U.S. legal structure for reparations? Although I did watch the testimony of Ermin Chemerinsky, Dean Chemerinsky. I'm looking for his latest book. I know I have it around here somewhere, but we're keeping it short today, and so I'm not going to look for it, and I probably won't discover it before I see. So it's not important, y'all. It's not related in that regard. He's a constitutional scholar of the first rank, although the grassroots organizer brother who said that local reparations is not good, and what's happening in Evanston is not good and should be opposed, and said that those of us who are Pan-Africanists, when the ancestors look back, we will be seen as traitors. And I was like, what? He called Ermin Chemerinsky the greatest constitutional scholar alive. And I was like, yeah, brother, the little knowledge is a dangerous thing. In other words, I get the passion, I get the intent, I get the desire. But when you don't know that you don't know, you can start talking, and people who know is like, what else should I kind of listen to for, with a caveat? Because Ermin Chemerinsky is a scholar of the first order. And the way they were talking about his testimony, as I'm sitting there listening after I testified, and then we had a little question and answer, I'm thinking to myself, that can't be what Chemerinsky said. Because the thing on Tuesday was not about the legal basis for reparations. The testimony on Tuesday was about whether or not race or lineage would be the best way to propose that the California legislature enact reparations legislation for African people in California.
But how? I mean, when you factor in race, you and I know, particularly in the South, there can be a whole lot of white folk.
Oh, no question.
That can trace their lineage to a enslaved person, and I guarantee you, at that point, they gonna be black, just like when they did the indigenous peoples, all the casinos. A lot of white people claimed indigenous heritage.
That's right.
Because you only have to be 132nd, right? One to have a great. I mean,
that's exactly right. In fact, what you have just described, Professor Hunter, is going to be the place where people say, oh, wait, you can't. First of all, This is a bill to propose to the legislature pathways for reparations. It is not the war. The war is going to be in the California legislature. Nothing has been passed. So all this white face of media, California proposes to exclude continental Africans and Caribbean Africans. Only black people enslaved who ancestors enslaved in the United States will get reparations. California ain't proposed nothing. The study commission voted on Tuesday after our debate and discussion. People say, well, Dr. Carr, you voted for lineage. Everybody, calm down. My young brother, Urban Chemerinsky is for lineage. No, I went back and looked at Dean Chemerinsky's testimony, and he said exactly what I was saying and what I expected he would have said and what he has said elsewhere, which is, this is what he said. He said, first of all, I'm not the messenger. Urban Chemerinsky said, I would support comprehensive reparations. However, given the state of California's Constitution, Prop 209, that y'all let them people pass a referendum, that buck dancing Negro Ward Connolly and them, that banned affirmative action in the state of California, meaning you cannot, by law, use race as a category. He says that's dead in the water. As soon as you pass legislation, they're going to court and going to get thrown out. He says, and on the federal level, and if you think the state of using race as a criteria for public policy is bad now, wait 3-4 months. Justice Brown Jackson will be joining Justice Sotomayor in dissent. Maybe they'll let Ketanji write the dissent. Wait, oh, I'm sorry. No, she won't. No, she won't. Because when you white nationalists like little Lynn Graham, we know you wasn't going. You're white nationalist, baby. I'm waiting to see what your junior senator from South Carolina going to do. You know, you going to vote against this black woman and live in infamy? I know what Corey said about you giving the greatest speech in the history of the United States Senate, but come on, bro. But anyway, point is this. So actually, Ketanji Brown Jackson will not be weighing in on this because she told them she's going to recuse herself. So we just left again to our Boricua sister, Sonia Sotomayor. Because I'd be damned, wasn't Elena Kagan the dean of Harvard Law School? She might recuse her damn self. Who knows? Come on, Sonia, do what you've been doing. Because the rules don't apply. In fact, to quote another Sonia, Will Sonia from Birmingham by way of New York, who has been at the Medgar Evers Black Writers Conference for many years, who I was sitting next to when she said what I'm about to say, which I've said here before. But Sonia Sanchez, when approached by a junior member of the faculty who did not have tenure and said, well, I would speak out, but I'm afraid because I got to go up for tenure. And Miss Sonia looked her, Sister Sonia looked her in the eye and said, that diminutive 5-foot Sonia Sanchez. And she said it that day in Brooklyn. We sitting in the auditorium, I'm sitting right next to her, loving this. Margot Natalie Crawford was sitting there too. We all sitting there. She said, she looked at that young sister and said, we all up for tenure, motherfucker. So anyway, in other words, there's never a time when you are safe. So I wish Ketanji hadn't said that she's going to recuse herself. But I know she thinks she had to say it because she had, she wants God on her side, but she must have that cosplay cold pie in mind her. And the Toonie Loon been taken out of play because Susan Collins says she's going to vote for it. So now maybe if she had said, I'm not going to recuse myself, that may have given Susan Collins the cover she needed to do what she wanted to do in her whole heart, which is vote no. But since she voted for Beer Kavanaugh, it's kind of hard, to remain. And anyway, but I guess she thinks she's already 1,000 years old. Maybe she thinks she's going to be 2,000 and going to run for Senate again. So, I mean, and she just won re-election. But anyway, the point.
And all of this takes place on the day of the assassination of Martin Luther King, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The oral, this is what I'm saying. If you think that the problem, right, they're going to have the vote and she'll be on. But she's not. Wait.
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay, no, but if we thought that so-called using race in public policy was in trouble before, the case they're about to hear at the Harvard case with Asian American students, it's not really Asian American students, it's a shell group funded by the billionaire Ed Bloom, who's been trying to get a affirmative action since he funded Sarah Fisher non-academic ass down there in Texas with the Fisher cases, Fisher 1 and Fisher 2, where they took another pickaxe to it and looked like Scalia was getting ready to help finish the job. Then he went and snuck out to one of his little private friends' hunting clubs and joined the ancestors, whatever his ancestors are, and they had to have a fight. That's when, the thing started fighting. The real fight jumped out. And Barack Obama, who probably should have nominated Ketanji at that point, made the mistake of thinking that he too was up for tenure and couldn't speak out, do whatever. So he nominated Merrick Garland, and the rest is history. Now we got stuck with the bill anyway. But the point is that they about to destroy whatever was left of using race as a criteria, even in education admissions. They've already destroyed it in employment. They've already destroyed it in set-aside programs. Some of y'all are young, old enough to remember in North Carolina, some in Virginia, Richmond, the Croson case, the Wygant case, where they just said you can't have set-aside quotas. Quotas are bad. Quotas are bad. Well, Dean Chemerinsky brought up all those points in his 13 minutes of testimony and question and answer to say, if you try to use race in as you've proposed this legislation so far, or what you're going to propose to the legislature to pass, the state going to knock it down in the courts, state courts, and the feds are going to knock it down in the federal court. So race is not in play. I'm watching the testimony like, of course. Yeah. Then he said, so of the two options, lineage, in other words, establishing that you have an ancestor who was enslaved, is the better option. Now I'm sitting there watching him, thinking to myself, this after I testified, I looked at it the next day, because the way they talked about it, I said, did a worm crawl in Chemerinsky's brain and eat his brain? Because I know he didn't say. So then I'm listening, I'm thinking, okay, so now what you're going to tell him is the legal challenge is going to say, you said lineage, but you mean race, which is, if you know the Seattle and Louisville cases, the education cases, that's what they would say. They say, in other words, anytime you use even a proxy for race, the scrutiny of whatever you pass is going to be strict. We'll talk about all this as we come up, because I'm 9 o'clock. We're not going to be here long today. In just a few minutes, we're going to stop. So that's exactly what he said. He said lineage will be a better option. And then he went on to say something I said during question and answer the day before. He said, now, if you do lineage, he said, again, what I said the day before and what you just said, Professor Hunter, he said two things. He says it is under-inclusive. He was being polite, because I was on, it was like 4 or 5 genealogists, me making the only legal arguments, and then the brother, the grassroots organizer, who said that all of us who Pan-Africans are traitors, and we don't need no continental Africans. Oh, slow your roll, bruh, because what's in my spirit is to get on here and embarrass you, but I know you don't mean that out of a place of anger. It's a place where somebody told you that a lineage-based argument will survive legal scrutiny. And you claiming it was Chemerinsky. But now I'm listening to Chemerinsky, and he says, not only is it under-inclusive, meaning, and somebody asked the genealogist this question, and they couldn't answer, so I jumped in and said, yeah, this is the point. This is the point I'm trying to make. Then the next night, Thursday night, Roland had the sister on the chair, Camilla Moore, good sister, as far as I could tell. I mean, and I asked her these questions, and she couldn't answer me either. In fact, she agreed there's no conflict between the Pan-Africanist or Black internationalist view and local reparations. There's no, but of course, I'm sure that pissed off a lot of people who think that there is, who somebody done told there is, and they believe with their whole heart there is, and that is utterly absurd. But anyway, Chemerinsky says it's under-inclusive, and do you really think that everybody whose ancestor was enslaved, there's a piece of paper somewhere that'll let you trace the lineage? I was like, I know that's what he said. I didn't even have to see his testimony. It's basic. There is no data bank that's going to let all you Negroes who came through enslavement, all of us who came through enslavement in the United States, you can't trace it to everybody. The thing you have to do, and this is where Chemerinsky, I mean, it's absurd. Chemerinsky told him that. And then they going to act like he didn't when I'm sitting there like, come on now.
So I just have one question, Dr. Carr. What's the goal? Because if the goal is to repair the harm done by the 400-year institution of enslavement, which, again, I completely get tying your going back. I can do it. I can go back 5-6 generations. My father did the work. A lot of us can do it. A lot of us cannot. But the harm of enslavement shows up in institutions,
That's right.
education, healthcare,
That's right.
walking in the street, not being harassed by police.
Come on.
And in that way, I was thinking about it today, yesterday, day before, when when you were testifying. I'm like, affirmative action is it benefits white women more than any other group in this country. They have benefited from affirmative action, which was supposed to specifically deal with the exclusion of us in all of these places. And when I think about redlining and all housing, when you show up with melanin, wherever you come from and land wherever, which is why I think the argument needs to be more global and
Right.
convene these countries, Spain, Portugal, France, England, and all of the countries that participated in this. And they got to write the check
Right.
for all of us, anybody that has melanin. And I
Mm.
think that changes the whole entire argument, because this argument divides us in a way that they want us divided. And ultimately, it's going to be a whole lot of white people getting a check if it is a check, right?
Right.
Trust and believe that. They will
Trust.
figure out how
Trust.
to trace their lineage and be black and proud as possible.
They got better documents. And guess what? The billionaires will come in. Look, go ask the indigenous people, as you said. You know who runs the casinos in this country? No, I'm 150th black. I mean, Native American. Now I'm going to run. And guess what? If they pay when they pass legislation, all legislation to be effective has to have a budget. You know how much money y'all gonna spend paying the Church of Latter-day Saints for their records? I mean, could you understand? Now, mind you, now people are asking these questions. Every time this question is asked, well, we haven't figured that out yet. Well, we haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, because this is being driven into the ditch. But it's important for people to understand exactly what you said, Professor Hunter, for two major things. One, affirmative action was supposed to redress previous harm. However, this and Chemerinsky said this too. See, the problem with when lawyers are talking and legal scholars are talking, if you don't know the background, you hear one thing. But people who know that background hear another thing. When he mentioned Bakke, of course, because see, affirmative action was for repairing harm until the early 70s when Bakke at UCal Berkeley, that's the school that Chemerinsky's the dean at, the law school, Bolt Hall. And you've seen after Prop 209, you've seen the number of black people at Berkeley Law nosedive. Why? Because now you can't use race as a factor. They're going to finish the job with Harvard, which is a private, well, they get federal funds, which, anyway, point is this. The point I was going to make is this. The Bakke versus the Regents of California case converted the rationale for affirmative action from redressing previous harm to diversity. And now there are generations of people who think, oh yeah, affirmative action is for diversity. It wasn't always for diversity. It wasn't intended for diversity. It's intended as a weak form of reparations of sorts, and then even disaggregated by class. Because again, you're not talking about structural repair. But I'm gonna get too far afield because it's almost time to go. And I just want to, like you say, you asked, what is the goal? What is the goal? Well, during my testimony, and this is what Chemerinsky didn't do, and from as far as I could tell, nobody did, which is why I wish I had been on that legal justification panel, because here's everything that's being omitted. Who says we got to play by their rules? If you saw this week, there was a voting rights case that a district court federal judge in Florida wrote a long, almost 300-page opinion where he eviscerated the Supreme Court, all the federal courts, and said Florida is passing voter suppression laws and it's racist as hell, and it violates the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and it violates the 14th Amendment. Now people say, well, that's not they're gonna overturn that on appeal. So the plain language of the federal Constitution does not preclude reparations. It is judge-made law, interpretation of that statute, of that Constitution, that is done it. Well, why do I vote? You vote so politicians who you want or are better than the other ones will pick judges who will interpret the plain language of the Constitution to read the opposite of what these white NASAs have done. It's very simple. And so people say, I ain't voting for nobody, cut the check. What I'm watching there is an almost exquisite stew of ignorance and arrogance. Cut the check. Wow. I get the passion, I get the harm, I get the hurt, and I get the ignorance. You're making the case for why reparations is necessary. Because you've been so deeply miseducated that you can't see that this is an intellectual war. And once they can't win the intellectual war, you're going to see the intellectual pretense drop and the straight brute hand come out. But we can't even get to that. So the objective in this arena is to say what you want and to do it by not by isolating yourself. The dean of Berkeley Law told y'all it's under inclusive. And what I said on Tuesday was we have to, what you said, you have to have a global approach. And I'll say here as we end, I made 4 major points, tried to make 4 points in my little 8 minutes. Number 1, demands for and questions for reparations have been raised since before the transformation of Western settler colonies into settler states as a challenge to undertake structural modern and social transformation. In other words, you've got to think about who will be eligible for reparations in a grouping that precedes the time there was a California or a United States man. The harm occurred in Africa. And then, of course, well, Africans sold Africans into slavery. I say, pause. Beyond saying that, what do you know about it? Oh, kings and queens. Shh. Be quiet now. Could you go get Harold French's Born in Blackness? Just start there. And that's going to be a port of entry, because the harm being redressed that you want redressed predates the imposition of today's borders. If you're worried about race and lineage, you have already accepted the terms that will ensure your defeat. Why? It is the legal. Y'all talked to Angie Porter about this. I was talking to her because I shot her my remarks. Said, look over this, destroy it, put it back together. She said, nah, this is tight. This is tight. I would add this. Okay, cool. Then I made my testimony. One thing she said was, I don't understand why we don't put this legal system on trial. Propose the legislation and then go into court and argue. Do you know how deeply in the bullseye of apartheid Charlie Houston and them boys were? And Constance Baker Motley and them were? They arguing before whole ass racists. But what they said was, if you're going to be a racist, I'm going to make you look your constitution dead in the eye and say, I don't care. And guess what? The other side blinked. Don't be no punk. My question fundamentally was, why we got to pick between race and lineage? If you got to pick between race and lineage, duh, you pick lineage, because that's the only, and that is a deeply flawed and ultimately going to be an unsuccessful strategy. The dean of Berkeley Law told y'all that. The one y'all came in for before you even talked to your brother, you went and got the white dude, so he's the okay. Ignorance and arrogance, co-blended, chef's kiss, such a deliciously painful combination of ignorance and arrogance. But you've got to have a strategy that thinks beyond. This is why next week we're going to look at Amari Obadeli, America the Nation State. We're going to look at our sister, Dorothy Benton Lewis from Cobra. This is a collection of documents returning to the source via reconciliation, reparations, repatriation, transformation, and African nationalism, creating the future. Dorothy Benton Lewis, an ancestor now. There she is in front of the White House with her petitions. These are from all over South Africa, Ghana, all over the United States. People coming together. We're going to look at the history of Cobra and the reparations movement, a movement too powerful to be ignored, championed, and cause too vital to be forgotten. We're going to examine this book, the first book we read in Philadelphia Freedom Schools, the year 2000, Randall Robinson, The Debt, What America Owes to Blacks. There are many different legal strategies. And then now, as I wind up, the second of the 4 points I made is that questions of race and lineage have cultural, social, and political definitions that are best addressed by studying how they intersect with, influence, and interact with legal definitions. So we have to do that. And also how they function beyond specific legal definitions in broader historical frameworks. Therefore, popular legal notions of race and lineage are inadequate tools for tracing the harm and those that impacted. And ultimately, if you understand how local reparations, and by local, I mean within countries, can interact in an international framework. In fact, there's a very good book I recommend to everyone by John Monroe called The Anti-Colonial Front: The African-American Freedom Struggle and Global Decolonization, 1945 to 1960. You see how the local structures, Chairwoman Moore, in her presentation, which supported lineage, half the people she quoted, and I made this point on Roland Show, when I asked her, I said, why, could you help clarify this notion that Black internationalism and Pan-Africanism are somehow against local reparations, since during your presentation, where I was at on Tuesday, half the people you talked about, Paula S.E. Robeson, William and Louise Thomas, were Black internationalists? She said, no, you're right. You're right. I'm sure some of them nativists, the black nativists, were like, what? Hey, I told you she couldn't be trusted. No, I told you the chef's kiss of ignorance and arrogance has created this toxic, noxious, and aromatic stew that's going to run you into a cul-de-sac. Because these people already lined it up. Well, hell, if they're going to pass lineage, then let's go get these blood tests together and we're going to get all the money. While they spent money at Ancestry.com, we just going to come in and get all the contracts because I got a slave ancestor somewhere. I know we can find something. Go back and look at all them plans. We own the plantation, right? Now it's finally time to claim those children that we didn't claim. We do have the records, don't we? I mean, like you said, come on, y'all. And guess what? Now you done pissed off everybody who suffers the afterlives of enslavement. Because ain't nobody asked Amadou Diallo where he came from, or Patrick Dorismond, or Abner the Weemer. Ain't nobody asked them when they took their lives or harmed them, because the afterlives of enslavement and colonialism are blackness. And blackness is a global category with local manifestations. And that has been at the heart of reparations movement at the beginning. And you know when this country moves? When it's terrified that things outside of its control are going to impact it. Do you know why Brown versus Board of Education went through? Because it was after World War II during the Cold War, and they was choosing up sides. And all them people who look like us from outside the United States, it's like, yeah, what the hell are y'all doing? Everybody said, them Africans don't care about us. Them Africans don't care about us. A book I taught, I thought I had it around here. A book I used when I was in graduate school, that I used for my, I don't know what I did with it. Yekutel Gershoni is an Israeli scholar. He made transition last year. He fought with the Israeli Defense Forces during the war where they made Israel up. Oh, pause. Where the state of Israel was created. Yeah, because I don't want nobody to take my colloquialism as if Israel is not there. No, it's there. It is absolutely there. And you know why it's there? Because people took the mythology of nationalism, the invisible logics of nationalism, and made it real with some guns and some international support. Gershoni wrote a book published in 1997 called Africans on African Americans, where he said, I started asking myself, was Liberia the only place that Africans from the United States came? He said, I found out while many of them went there, the idea of who African Americans were all over the continent. So he traces that. I used it in one of my Intro to African American States classes when I was teaching at Temple, to help students begin to answer the question. People say, Africans sold Africans into slavery. That is one of the most exquisitely ignorant. In other words, fact-free. Read French's book. Understand that, well, I'm going to get into international law. We're going to do that because it's time to go. The third or the fourth, let me tie what I was going to say, though, right quick by saying that when you start talking about international law frameworks, none of that means anything if you don't have the power to back it up, just like domestic law. However, when you start talking about them, you have to understand that state relations to states, something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, doesn't predate the modern world. If you're going to back map it, you have grounds for arguing that the people in Africa, whatever they did to each other, whatever those subsets of groups did, was coerced by groups of people who came from outside who knew what was going to happen to the people who ended up on those boats. That in itself is a violation of broad frameworks of international law if you backmap them. And so you trace the harm to the continent. You don't trace the harm to the diaspora. And then you see how does that manifest in the diaspora in specific places. So it might mean that you end up still with an AB 3121 study bill that says lineage. But what you haven't done then, you said we got to get beyond lineage to a class formation that can maybe survive legal scrutiny at the local level, but also connect to international networks that will create pressure from outside. What you've done now is announce to the world, we're going it alone. Cut the check. And now what happens to all of those people who've been here 100 years or been here 50 years? What happens to those Nigerian kids from Houston who were born, came out their mama's womb in Harris County Hospital? But you got to go to whoever enslaved. Do you really think that the harm that occurs to me every day? I'm from Texas. I don't care. Number 3, accordingly, Black merely parrots a paradigm of colonialism and is inappropriate for any effort aiming to decolonize the modern world. What's the objective? The objective is to decolonize the modern world. And the fourth point I made is that recipients of California's repair efforts should suffer no preclusive impacts. In other words, why are you precluding? Have an opt out, not an opt in. You can't opt in if you ain't got no documents, and y'all ain't got no documents. And so I'll end with this for now, and then we're gonna stop because you got to go to the conference, and I'm gonna be quiet now. We're gonna keep going. Y'all come back next week. We get into this really deeply into this. At the end of the day, I'll quote Amari Obadelli, American the Nation State. Baba Obadelli said that the underlying theory of his book is that people under the stress of conquest strive to maintain their national identity and to free, reconstruct, or establish states of their own. At the heart of what we want to be we. You can't reverse what happened, but what's the best way to be restored to your full humanity so you can live your life? That's not an exclusive strategy. It requires an inclusive strategy. Can we see our common humanity? And people say, well, how can you deal with the law? Did you even think about it? Or were you so worried about the Mother May I rules of a society where those rules are always changing depending on pressure to literally put the gun to your own damn head as if they're going to say, oh, I see, very compelling. Okay, here's your check. That's a fantasy. I'm going to stop with that.
And just parenthetically, the original Israel was proposed to be in Uganda.
How about that? Robert Weisborough, get a book called African Zion.
So just
That's right.
landlocked in the middle of Africa. Mm-hmm. But that's a conversation for another day. And speaking of, you know, people coming together, if Lee Daniels and Monique could come together, because she's going to be replacing Octavia Spencer.
How about that?
There's hope for us. That's all I'm saying. Lee Daniels and Monique are coming together to produce a film for Netflix. All hope is restored.
Can I ask you whether or not you think that Monique would have gotten that shot if she had stayed silent?
She would probably not have.
Exactly. California, please understand this. The reason you can't use race is because they passed Prop 209. Are there enough people in California who would want to be included that you could put another proposition on and get rid of that? The answer is yes. Why would you just accept the terms of your opponent? Right. If Monique had been quiet, she's not sitting where she's sitting right now. In other words, this is not the time to say, okay, that's y'all rules. Okay, how can we split it to their rules? What happened to y'all? That is, you just created a whole new reparations movement. That ain't got nothing to do with the long range.
Well,
but anyway.
I mean, this is why we're in Nubia, to remember who we are. A lot of us are starting our institutional knowledge last year.
That's right.
You know, and my question is, what did they do before? That's always the question. What did they do before? Dr. Carr, what did they do before? What did they, because there's always a before, and they probably did it better. We're like a carbon copy ripoff version of the people that did it first. That's the people that did it before, and they did it better. Why are we working so hard? Just pull out the blueprints.
That's right. Pull out the blueprints and get rid of 50% of them, get rid of 90% of them, but now you got some blueprints. Because guess what? Everybody else in the world got blueprints. You know why them people in Ukraine is fighting like hell? Because they remember before it was the Soviet Union. If they just woke up today, they could believe what Putin says. Or Russia says. It's not how it works, y'all. And people say, anyway, enough. We're going to stop for today. But next week.
Well, finally, before we stop. Let's put some prayers and warm feelings out for Dawn Staley to whip that ass, UConn's ass, tomorrow.
All of it. Gino.
So yep. South Carolina, let's go.
Let's go. Look, I ain't no HWCU, but I'm a Dawn Staley stan. You know what, Professor Hunter? Thank you, because I know you, and I know that you know this so well. I mean, chapter and verse. That Gino dude at Connecticut, he for Gino.
Oh,
Dawn Staley represents women's basketball. If it ain't UConn women's basketball, he don't give a damn.
and have problems. I mean, you know. When women can coach freely in the men's whatever,
come on,
there's just too many. I just think, you know, he represents everything that's wrong with everything. You know, just kind of lord over. The reason why people are going back into the office, that same energy, because I need to lord over, oversee, and be in control of everything as a man, as a white man. And I just feel like, you know, he represents all of that. And I got the answer. No, you don't. No, don't stay.
No, you don't.
The blueprint for what it should look like. And this community, when she gave that little piece of net from the last championship to all of the black coaches
Come on.
in the NCAA, that's what the community is supposed to look like. And she
No,
represents all of that. So I'm
she represents
100%
it.
South Carolina. Let's go.
Let's go. Do you see what he said about it? He said, well, what do you think about it? He said, oh, she's great because, Philadelphia produces, because he's from Philly. You going to try to son her now? You going to try to daughter her now? She going to beat that ass. All of it. And we're going to revel in it because she got a squad. I know you always cherry picking, trying to find the number one white girls in the history of the world.
And black girls. And a lot of black women.
Well, a lot of black girls, but, when I look at that South Kakalaki squad, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. It's time to get some governance.
I mean, this is gonna be a thing, and I'm looking. I'm here for it. I'm here for it, and I'll see some of y'all at the conference. And I'm gonna go. And happy birthday to my mama. Today is her birthday. Which,
happy birthday!
In the hospital, but we're gonna deal with that.
We're gonna send all good energy to her because she gonna keep going strong. She gotta make at least that century mark. Then you sent me the thing about the sister, and I got her book around here somewhere. You gotta say a word about that 100-year-old park ranger.
Yeah, I had talked about it on the radio, but she has retired, and and it just gets. We talked last week about vanning, the van life and all of that. But a lot of black folk like to also go to national parks and camp and do all of the wonderful things. And so I just want to say a lovely shout out and happy retirement to Betty Reed Soskin, the oldest active ranger in National Park Service history. She retired at 100 yesterday, and that is quite a feat, black woman.
I watched her giving a talk. She's sitting up in there like she's 38 years old.
Yes.
Was sitting on a stool with no back, with her legs crossed, talking to her. I'm like, how old did you say?
100. We have work to do, people.
No question.
But their blueprints is the point too. So we don't have to start from scratch, which is a wonderful thing, and that's why we're here. And I love you.
Love you.
Thank you for being in the community and giving us the framework.
There they are. They go. Oh, look, that's the hoodie. That's the hoodie right there.
Yeah. I love it. I love y'all, Nubians. We'll see you tomorrow with the Maroon Medicine test. Yes. And then, of course, Monday. And then Tuesday, we got the Meta Netchers back. And then we just on and on. I love it.
I love it.
All right.